The Endless Road. On a cold and foggy night, Mark and his friends set out on a road trip to celebrate the end of their college years. They were excited to embark on an adventure, taking a route less traveled through remote countryside roads. The moon was a faint crescent, barely illuminating the mist that seemed to cling to the ground like a shroud. As they drove deeper into the night, the fog thickened, swallowing their headlights and casting an eerie glow on the asphalt. Laughter filled the car as they exchanged stories, but the tension in the air was palpable. The feeling of isolation grew stronger with each mile, and unease settled upon them like a heavy cloak. Suddenly, their GPS lost signal, leaving them completely disoriented in the labyrinthine network of winding roads. The car's headlights flickered, then dimmed, casting long shadows that danced ominously on the fog. Mark's grip on the steering wheel tightened as he struggled to keep the car on the narrow path. An unsettling silence fell over the car, broken only by the soft hum of the engine and the distant hooting of an owl. As they rounded a bend, a figure appeared in the middle of the road, shrouded in the mist. Mark slammed on the brakes, the tires screeching on the damp pavement as the car came to a stop just inches from the mysterious figure. Heart pounding, Mark and his friends stared at the figure in shock. It was a woman, dressed in tattered clothing, her face obscured by a mass of dark hair. Her eyes gleamed with an unnatural intensity as she stared at them, sending a chill down their spines. Without a word, she began to approach the car, her movements slow and deliberate. Fear and confusion gripped the group. Should they drive away? Should they offer help? Before they could decide, the woman reached the driver's side window and pressed a bloodied hand against the glass. Mark's breath caught in his throat as he saw her twisted smile, her lips parted to reveal rows of sharp, inhuman teeth. Panicking, Mark slammed his foot on the gas pedal, the car lurching forward and narrowly avoiding the woman. As they sped away, the fog seemed to grow thicker, making it impossible to see more than a few feet ahead. The road stretched on endlessly, each curve feeling like a loop leading them back to the same desolate stretch of highway. Time seemed to lose all meaning as the group drove on, the fog and darkness enveloping them in a cocoon of dread. They tried to use their phones to call for help, but there was no signal. The car's fuel gauge showed no change, as if they were trapped in a perpetual nightmarish loop. Exhaustion and paranoia gnawed at them, their nerves fraying with every passing hour. Shadows moved in the corners of their vision, and distant whispers seemed to float on the wind. Mark's eyes burned from the strain of navigating the endless road, and his friends' faces were etched with a mixture of fear and despair. Finally, just as hope was fading, the fog began to thin, and the road widened. The car emerged into a dimly lit gas station, its flickering lights a welcome sight after the endless darkness. They pulled over, gasping for breath as reality slowly settled back in. The gas station attendant gave them a puzzled look, but they could hardly find the words to explain their harrowing experience. As they drove away from the gas station, the fog lifted completely, revealing the familiar landmarks of a town they recognized. They reached their destination, their road trip transformed into a chilling tale they would never forget. To this day, Mark and his friends could never quite shake the feeling that they had driven through a thin veil between the realms of the living and the unknown, and that the woman in the fog was something far more sinister than they could ever comprehend. The Midnight Hitchhiker. Late one summer night, Sarah found herself driving alone along a desolate stretch of highway. She had decided to take a shortcut through a remote forested area to reach her destination faster. The moon hung low in the sky, casting an eerie glow on the road ahead. Despite her fatigue, the solitude of the road offered a strange sense of tranquility. As she drove, her headlights illuminated a figure standing at the side of the road, thumb extended. A hitchhiker. Sarah's instincts roared within her. She knew the dangers of picking up strangers, especially in the dead of night. But a sense of empathy and curiosity compelled her to pull over. The hitchhiker was a young man, dressed in worn clothing that seemed out of place in the modern world. His eyes held an otherworldly intensity as he thanked Sarah for stopping and asked for a ride. Hesitation gnawed at her, but she unlocked the car doors, allowing him to enter. As they drove, the atmosphere in the car grew tense. The hitchhiker's gaze never wavered from the road, and Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that his presence was unnatural. She struck up a conversation, attempting to ease the discomfort that had settled between them. The hitchhiker spoke in a low, mesmerizing tone, recounting stories that seemed to blend the mundane and the supernatural. He spoke of old legends, of spirits that haunted the woods they were driving through, and of deals struck at crossroads with dire consequences. Sarah's unease deepened with every word, and she couldn't shake the feeling that she was entangled in something far more sinister than she could have imagined. As they continued down the road, a thick fog began to roll in, obscuring the path ahead. Sarah's heart raced as her surroundings became increasingly unfamiliar. The hitchhiker's stories grew darker, his tone more ominous, and the world outside seemed to melt into shadows. Suddenly, he turned to Sarah, his eyes glowing with an eerie light. He spoke words that chilled her to the bone, revealing intimate details about her past that he had no way of knowing. Panic surged through her veins as she realized that the hitchhiker was no ordinary traveler. He was something supernatural, something that knew her deepest secrets. Terrified, Sarah slammed on the brakes, the tires screeching as the car came to a halt. She turned to the hitchhiker, demanding answers. He leaned closer, his breath cold as ice, and whispered that he was a harbinger of fate, a being that walked between realms to collect the stories and souls of those he encountered on the roads of the night. Desperation fueled Sarah's actions. She threw open the car door and sprinted into the forest, the fog swallowing her form. Branches clawed at her as she ran, her heart pounding in her chest. She couldn't escape the feeling that the hitchhiker was right behind her, his presence a looming threat. After what felt like an eternity, Sarah burst through the trees and onto the road, gasping for breath. The fog had lifted, and she found herself in a familiar location, just a short distance from her destination. The hitchhiker was nowhere to be seen, but his words continued to echo in her mind. The experience left Sarah shaken, haunted by the encounter with the enigmatic hitchhiker. She often wondered if he had been a figment of her imagination, a manifestation of her exhaustion and fear. But the memory of his glowing eyes and chilling words remained etched in her memory, a reminder that some roads can lead to places far beyond the realm of the known, and that the darkness of the night can hold secrets that defy explanation. The Vanishing Motel. David was a seasoned traveler, accustomed to long road trips and the sense of adventure that came with them. On a misty autumn evening, he found himself driving along a seemingly endless highway through a remote part of the country. The rain drummed against the windshield, and the road stretched ahead like a ribbon disappearing into the horizon. As darkness fell, David's weary eyes searched for a place to rest for the night. Just when he was beginning to worry about finding accommodations, a weathered sign emerged from the fog, Rustic Haven Motel, 5 miles ahead. Relieved, he followed the arrow, eager to find warmth and shelter. The road grew narrower as he approached the motel. The mist seemed to cling to the trees, casting an eerie ambience around the area. The motel's neon sign flickered dimly in the rain-soaked air, and the building itself appeared frozen in time, its paint faded and its windows clouded. David parked in front of the office, raindrops dancing on the hood of his car. He stepped inside, the bell above the door ringing with a melancholic tone. The reception area was dimly lit, the furniture outdated and the air heavy with a musty scent. A tired-looking man emerged from a back room, his eyes widening slightly as he saw David. He introduced himself as Mr. Turner, the motel's owner, and offered David a room for the night. The transaction was swift, and David was handed a weathered key before being directed to his room at the far end of the building. Inside the room, David found a scene straight out of a vintage movie. The decor was reminiscent of a bygone era, complete with floral patterned wallpaper and antique furniture. The rain tapping against the window created a soothing backdrop, and David felt a sense of comfort as he settled in for the night. However, as the hours passed, an unsettling feeling settled over him. The sound of footsteps echoed in the corridor outside his room, even though he hadn't seen any other guests arrive at the motel. Shadows seemed to move just beyond the edge of his vision, and strange creaking sounds filled the air. Deciding he needed some fresh air, David stepped out into the corridor and saw the motel's sign outside through the rain-streaked window. But something was off. The sign read Rustic Haven Motel, not Rustic Haven. Puzzled, he dismissed it as a trick of his tired mind and returned to his room. When he woke the next morning, the mist had lifted, revealing the motel's surroundings. But as David stepped outside, he was met with confusion and disbelief. The motel was gone. In its place stood an empty lot, overgrown with weeds, as if the building had never existed. Dumbfounded, David searched for any sign of the motel, but there was nothing, no traces of the faded sign, the weathered building, or Mr. Turner. It was as if he had stepped into a ghostly oasis in the night, a place that only existed when the weary travelers needed shelter. To this day, David is haunted by the memory of that vanishing motel. He's left to wonder whether he had stumbled upon a transient portal, a place that appears only to those who are lost in their need. The experience serves as a reminder that the road can lead to mysteries far beyond the mundane, and that the line between reality and the supernatural can blur when the night is darkest.